Hello, football fans, and thanks again for joining in. This is the CIS portion of Rouge Radio. I'm Kevin Garbuio, joined again by Michel Belanger. Thanks, Michel, for joining us. You joined us earlier in the year, and we made some predictions, and now we'll be able to see if they're coming true.
Yeah, it's playoff time, or almost playoff time. Playoff time in the OUA, anyways, and it's going to be exciting over the next couple of weeks.
Before we get into playoff time, we're going to talk about the West. What happened? Calgary losing to Regina. Regina seemed to pull a game out, and they didn't even have a quarterback in there with Mark Mueller out. Take us through that. Take us through what's going to happen for Regina having to win without Mark Mueller down the stretch.
Well, I think if you're Calgary, you go to Regina, you travel to Regina, you have a 6-0 record. Regina already has 2 losses, so basically, if you're the Dinos, you can lose one of those last 2 games, and actually, you can even you go into your game against Regina with an 18-point head-to-head cushion because you beat them by 18 points in the season opener. So sometimes when that's the case, when you have 2 games to play and you've all but secured first place in the division, you don't have your best games. Maybe you don't take that game. I don't want to say you don't take that game as seriously, but the intensity level might not be the same as if it was a do or die game, to make the playoffs or something like that. So I think that's probably what happened to Calgary in that game. But like you said, to me, the biggest surprise is the fact that is not necessarily the fact that Regina beat Calgary, but it's the fact that they beat Calgary without fifth-year quarterback Mark Mueller. So to me, that's the big surprise in that result from Friday night.
So if the season ends right now, it's pretty much set, actually. We were talking Calgary is in the 1 seed, Regina at 2, Saskatchewan 3, Manitoba 4. Saskatchewan securing that tiebreak because of what happened with their matchup against Manitoba last week, with them getting a 1-point edge in the tiebreaking. What do you see for the playoffs? Do you see any team contesting Calgary, or do you see maybe there's a potential for an upset?
Well, you have an interesting scenario because you have Manitoba, so we know that Manitoba is going to travel to Calgary for the first round of the playoffs, the Canada West semifinals. But now Manitoba, before that, has to travel to Calgary for the regular season, the last game of the regular season. So Manitoba actually goes to Calgary on back-to-back weeks. Manitoba looked good. I think they surprised a lot of people early in the season. Going into the season, what we were told about Manitoba was they were kind of in a rebuilding year, maybe, getting better. But that's a team, don't forget, that's a team that hadn't made the playoffs since they won the Vanier Cup in 2007. So Manitoba was better this year, but they were talking about a rebuilding year, maybe 1 year away. And they started the season 3-1. They looked really good, but the second half of the season hasn't been that good for the Bison. Mind you, they just beat UBC this week, pretty impressive, putting up 37 points against UBC. So, but, if you ask me, are they going to upset Calgary? Especially with the game being played at Calgary, it would be a huge surprise. Saskatchewan's been playing better. Mind you, they're going to have to beat Regina on the road to in the semifinals. So, but to me, the big question mark is, will Mark Mueller be back for Regina in the first round of the playoffs? One more year, to heal and get better and get the playoffs. Regina finishes the regular season at home against Alberta this coming weekend. But if they don't have Mark Mueller back, I know they just beat Calgary, but, like we said, it was a 3-point game, 12-9, kind of a sloppy game. Could they do it again in the playoffs at Calgary? That would be a pretty big upset. But if they have Mark Mueller, you never know, because we've been saying the entire season, pretty much every Canada West football expert was saying that Regina would be the second best team behind Calgary, and with Mark Mueller, you never know.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. Moving on now, big news, CIS wide news. McGill's appeal or request to get into the OUA was denied. The OUA saying that McGill, playing in the Q, has an opportunity to compete for the Vanier Cup. The reason why McGill wants to go into the OUA and join it is because they feel they can't compete with the high-spending teams, the big-budget teams like Laval, Montreal, and Sherbrooke. So with that, can you shed some light onto that situation for us?
Well, I think McGill, when McGill announced that they had put in a request to the OUA last spring to play in the OUA, to move their football program to the OUA, they gave a number of reasons. Some of them were because they recruit a lot of players outside of Quebec, so they're always a little bit, younger than especially the French programs in Quebec. Also, McGill talked about renewing some of their rivalries with the old four rivals, like Western and U of T and Queens and all of that. But at the end of the day, don't forget that the OUA is already by far the biggest football conference in CIS with 10 teams. They are already getting an additional team next year with Carleton coming back in 2013. So, I don't know if that played in the decision. I know the OUA announced late in the week, I believe on Friday, they announced what their new formats would be for the 2013-14 season in a number of sports, including football, because they're adding a number of schools in not only Carleton in football, but in a couple of different sports. And I was reading that their regular season next year would start on August 25th. So that's really early, because now that they're going to have 11 teams, they're going to have a bye week, and so they're going to start the season on August 25th, which is a week earlier than what they've done in recent years. The OUA would always start on Labor Day weekend. So I'm sure that they probably looked at that and they said, oh, what, if we have to start on August 25th with 11 teams, what would we do with 12 teams and all of that? So it probably played in the decision, was probably a factor. But also, you look on the Quebec side, maybe the OUA looked at the Quebec conference, because that the two conferences, the people from the RSAQ talk to the people from the OUA, and they probably looked at the Quebec conference, and now they would be down to 5 teams. OUA would be up to 12 teams. So, I mean, there are so many factors that they probably looked at, and at the end of the day, they said, you know what? You have a pretty solid thing going, a pretty solid conference in Quebec, and the growth of football in Quebec in the last couple of years has been pretty much amazing. So, you have a pretty good thing going in Quebec, and there is no reason really for you guys to leave that conference. So
with Quebec right now, we have Laval at the number 1 seed. We have Montreal at number 2. Do you see any other team competing, or do you think Montreal, Laval will be the Dunsmore? Could we predict any upsets happening?
Well, they've definitely, Montreal and Laval have definitely looked like the cream of the crop in Quebec, and from day one. I know that Sherbrooke gave Montreal a good game. I believe the final score was 15-6 at Montreal a couple of weeks ago, 3-4 weeks ago. But that was kind of that game was played in horrible weather conditions. It was raining all game, and kind of one of those sloppy games. Montreal had played Sherbrooke at Sherbrooke earlier this season. I think they won by 3 touchdowns or something like that. So, and Laval beat Sherbrooke at Sherbrooke 48-10. So definitely Laval and Montreal look like the teams to beat in Quebec. They've played head to head. Laval won at home. Montreal won at home. That second game was closer. Montreal only won by 3 points, but it would be a huge upset. It would be a huge upset if a team other than Montreal in Laval made it to the Dunsmore Cup.
Well, I expect Laval to be there, especially since they removed Dwayne John as the offense coordinator under a shroud of controversy, whether he was fired or whether he stepped down or whether he's pursuing other options. But since then, Laval's really looked like the Laval of old under Justin Etche with their passing game. Their scoring has just exploded since that moment, putting up scores of 65 and 57, things like that nature. Do you see Laval coming back, rounding into form, and were they just toying with us earlier in the season, or has Etche really left his mark on this program?
I think they had kind of a rough start, but I mean, don't forget, Dwayne John. In Dwayne John, you have an offensive coordinator who led the team to the Vanier Cup last year, and last time I checked, they did take McMaster to overtime, and they scored 38 points in that Vanier Cup game. So, they had their problems in the first 2 weeks of the season, but you're right. I mean, they've absolutely been rolling, including the first game against Montreal, which they won 30-11 at Laval in a dominating performance. I know that they lost to Montreal 2 weekends ago, but like we said, by only 3 points. And Montreal is a really, really good team. I think if those two teams meet again, and again, everyone expects them to meet again in the Dunsmore Cup, the X factor, if you want, is going to be Laval playing at home, and we know that they have the tiebreaker against Montreal if they finish with the same record. So Laval would play the Dunsmore Cup at home, and this week they beat Bishops for their 55th consecutive win at home since 2004. So that's pretty amazing. They haven't lost at home in the regular season or playoffs in 8 years. So can Montreal pull it off at Laval? It's going to be tough. If the game had been played at Montreal, I would have said you can probably flip a coin between those two teams this year. But in Quebec City, I think you have to give the edge to Laval.
Speaking of Laval, the only team that's beaten the Acadia Axemen this year as we shift to the East Coast in the AUS. Acadia clinching first place really easily this season in the AUS, but they really have struggled against top defenses. Against St. Mary's, they've really struggled to put points together. I was at the game this weekend where they was as exciting as a 12-5 game could be, but they are struggling to score. Do you see Acadia being able to move forward from the AUS or be able to contend with a team from the Q at the UTEC Bowl?
It's going to be hard. I mean, I think people look at the two matchups for the bowl games this year, and everyone's really excited for the Canada West at OUA national semifinal. I mean, when you look at it, you could have a Calgary traveling to McMaster or Calgary traveling to Queens in a rematch of the 2009 Vanier Cup, and I think everyone's really excited about that matchup. And then you look at the UTEC Bowl matchup, and it's AUS at Quebec, as you just said, and I don't know. It seems to be Montreal and Laval, and again, we keep talking about Montreal and Laval, but because those are the two teams that we kind of expect coming out of Quebec, and those are two really, really solid teams this year, especially defensively. And in the AUS, it hasn't been the best year. You look at Acadia's running away with it, like you said. They're 6-1, and behind them you have a 3-4 team and a pair of 2-5 teams. So, and Acadia's won big in a couple of these games, but some other games they haven't exactly dominated. So, when you look at what Acadia has done this year, in what could be considered kind of an off-season in the AUS, it's kind of hard to see them traveling to Quebec and upsetting, either Montreal or Laval. If the game was played at home at Acadia, you never know. But as you mentioned, Acadia traveled to Laval early in the season. I believe it was week 3, and I think the score was 31-7 for Laval, or 31-10 for Laval, and that was kind of before Laval really got going. That was kind of in the early stages of the season when Laval was struggling a little bit. So you know, 2 months later, could Acadia travel to Laval or Montreal and pull off a big win? Hey, it's the national semifinals. Anything can happen. It's November football. You never know. That bowl game could be played in you know, freezing rain or snow or what have you. But I think that the Quebec team will definitely go into that bowl game as a big favorite. But hey, it's one game. That's the beauty of football. It's one game.
Well, and then the next question I have for you regarding the AUS, are you surprised that Mount Allison clinched a playoff spot before St. Mary's?
Well, St. Mary's has been kind of a mystery from day one. You know, new coach, not a lot of stability or consistency at the quarterback position. Jameek Taylor has been injured. You know, their all-star receiver and kick returner. You know, former AUS MVP. So it's been a disappointing season at St. Mary's. I'm pretty sure, you know, all the players and coaches would agree with that. But don't count them out. I mean, like you said, they just had this week a close game against Acadia, but behind Acadia, it's been a really interesting season. You know, like we said, Mount Allison at 3-4, St. Mary's and Saint FX both at 2-5. I haven't checked I don't have all the scores in front of me, but I want to say that Saint FX, St. Mary's, and Mount Allison, they probably have something. All have a 1-1 record against each other, a head-to-head, or 1-2 record. So anything can happen. You know, can someone beat Acadia? No AUS team has done it this year. Acadia's only loss was to Laval. So, but again, it's one game.
And moving on, finally now, just the OUA. We have McMaster at 1. Shocking. I didn't predict this. We talked about earlier in the season, Guelph at 2. How exciting is it for the OUA and the CIS itself to see a young program now move forward and make these big steps? Now looking with a chance now to take that next step to be a new powerhouse in Canadian football.
It's a lot of fun. I mean, Guelph is definitely the kind of the feel-good story of the season. You know, for years and years and years, you know, in the OUA, it's kind of been you know, Mac and Queens and Western and Laurier a couple of years ago, and Ottawa is always up there. Now we saw last year Windsor kind of making a push, you know, to crack that. Let's call them the top 4. Guelph this year 7-1, like you said, no one saw this coming. I remember when Windsor won big against Ottawa in the first week of the season, and then they lost to Guelph in week 2, I believe, and everybody kind of went, oh, you know, Guelph just beat Windsor. Did you see that score? And Guelph had just got killed in the first week against McMaster, and then a couple of weeks later, Guelph beat Western, and then, you know, you're like, oh, I guess we should start, you know, taking them seriously. And then the week after, they beat Queens. So then you're thinking, oh my God, are they for real? So I think that's the one thing, the one black spot on Guelph's season so far, and it's their only loss of the season, is that 50-9 loss to McMaster in the season opener. So I think people are going to look at that and say, you know, which Guelph team is going to show up if those two teams meet again in the Yates Cup. Is it the team that lost 50-9 to McMaster in week 1, or the team that has won 7 straight to close out the regular season?
And the next question for the playoffs, who do you have going through into the semis? With playoffs starting this weekend in the OUA, we have Laurier making the trip to Richardson Stadium against Queens, and we have the 2 W's playing Western and Windsor. Who do you have going forward?
I want to say it's hard to, if you start with Laurier and Queens. I mean, Laurier, they've had some bad losses. I mean, especially to close out the season. They lost to my apologies. They lost to Western 56-3, I believe, in week 7, and then just got hammered, got shut out by McMaster in their last game of the regular season. So that's not exactly what you call going into the playoffs with momentum. And Queens is tough. Queens has a good defense. They have a good quarterback with Billy McPhee. So I think that game you have to give a big advantage to Queens. Now, Windsor and Western is an interesting one. With the exception of that game against Laurier, when they beat Laurier 56-3 in Week 7, Western hasn't been exactly dominating opponents the way we're used to seeing them dominating opponents. Now, to be fair, they've been playing a rookie at quarterback, Will Finch, for a couple of weeks now, ever since Donnie Marshall went down, I believe, in Week 5. And Windsor, Windsor is exciting, and Windsor can score points with Austin Kennedy and Brescason at receiver, but they're not going similar to Laurier. They're not exactly going into the postseason with momentum. I mean, they finished with a loss against Waterloo, 48-29. I mean, that's not exactly a great way to go into the postseason. I was told, I wasn't at the game, I didn't see that game, but I was told that they rested, a number of regular players. But still, do you really want to go into the postseason with a couple of losses and with a 3-5 record? Not exactly, but of the teams who could pull out an upset in the playoffs, especially teams with a losing record, Windsor is definitely not. Put it this way, Western is definitely not the Windsor. I mean, a team that I would want to face in the first round of the playoffs. But because the game's played at Western, I'll give the advantage to Western.
And finally, do you see anyone unseating Kyle Quinlan for the Heck Creighton Trophy?
Well, we sent the trophy to the trophy shop, and we had his name put on it actually last week. No, I'm just kidding. But obviously, like you said, he has to go in as the overwhelming favorite for the Heck Creighton. I mean, what a season, what a year Kyle Quinlan put together. Just absolutely fantastic numbers when you look at it. He went into Week 7 without throwing a single interception, and he finally threw a couple of picks against Windsor in Week 7, but finishes the season with over 300-yard passing. He has at 307 yards a game. He's third in the country, and don't forget that a lot of those games he was pulled at the half or early in the third quarter because they had big leads. So you can probably add, if he plays all the entire game for the whole season, you're probably looking at a 3,000-yard season, and he almost threw for 2,500 yards as it is. But you look at his other numbers. I mean, obviously the 19 TDs versus 2 interceptions is absolutely phenomenal. When Billy Green from UBC won the Heck Creighton last year, we thought he had a phenomenal season because I think his TD to INT ratio was 20-4, and Kyle Quinlan this year is 19-2, and another amazing stat for Quinlan, 69%, 68.9% to be exact, completion percentage. That is an OUA single season record, and it's 5th best in the history of CIS football. So, I mean, what more can you say about Kyle Quinlan? We thought we had seen it all last year in the playoffs when he was named MVP of the Yates Cup, MVP of the UTEC Bowl, and MVP of the Vanier Cup when he led McMaster to their first ever Vanier Cup. And now this season, he put together a phenomenal season. I mean, I was obviously joking about having his name already on the trophy at this point of the season, but I don't know who's going to be named MVP. We just assume he's going to be named OUA MVP, and I don't know who's going to be named MVP of the other conferences, but he's going to be tough to beat for the Heck Creighton this year.
Well, I agree with that completely. And for another edition of Rouge Radio, Kevin Garbuio, thanks again for joining us, Michel.
Anytime.
All right, and with that, thank you all for tuning in, and we'll be back next week to preview some of the playoff actions and recap what happened in the OUA. Thanks for tuning in.